It was a long day of Zoom lectures. A teacher was explaining inter-process interactions, and then I learned about sockets and their use in Linux. The spark has ignited in my mind and I decided to create my own HTTP server. But without all these fancy frameworks and technologies that do all of the work for you, I choose C++. Right after the classes I went to YouTube, the sacred repository of human knowledge. Of course, some have already done it before, but I felt even more encouraged. Let's put these lyric talks away. In today's video, I will show you my journey creating an HTTP server in Linux. This path was full of trials and errors. The solutions I have probably could be better, but at least it works. First, we need to create a socket that will listen to a certain port for incoming connections. For this, we need to create a socket, configure it, bind a port number to a socket, set the listener that will listen for incoming connections, and finally, accept connections. First 4 steps I moved into a separate function, so I never have to see it again. Then we need to handle incoming connections. We can do it in a simple loop, but if we want the server to work with multiple clients at the same time, we need to consider other solutions. The most common ones are using a fork function to clone the process, or we can create a separate thread for each client. We also can use multiplexing, but it is not as simultaneous as we used to. Today I'm not going to explain the differences between all of these, but I give you short information from Wikipedia, so you can pause and read it if you want. I've chosen to go with forking because it's pretty simple to implement among all of them, but later I kinda regret it. I will tell you why a bit later. So when we fork the process, we clone and run it, starting from the exact same place in code. After the fork function, we need to detect whether we are in a child or parent process. If it's a child process, we call a function to handle the client connection. If it's the parent process, we wait for another client to connect. First, I just wanted to receive text information from the client and send it back, just to ensure that everything is working properly. Here is why the forking is not the best option.
God damn.
At the time, I didn't realize that, but when we terminate our main program, other instances that handle clients continue to run. So if there are clients connected, the port remains in use and cannot be bound again. And that's why I see this message after rebooting the server. At least, that's my understanding of what's going on here. In future upgrades, I will probably move to the threads pool. Now we can accept and read messages from the client. We can move to the next part, which is HTTP request decoding. See, HTTP is a hypertext transfer protocol. Therefore, the message has a determined structure. In a separate file, I've defined structures for request and response messages. Then I asked ChatGPT to write me a function that would pass incoming text messages into my structure. And it gave me this piece of code that worked pretty well. When I have a decoded message, I can read and recognize the request path and method, which means I can do a simple routing. For this, I wrote a function that takes my structure as an input argument and returns a response that will be delivered to a client. The function itself is a bunch of if statements that lead to a desirable method, an entry point like in other APIs, such as ASP.NET Core or Node.js. In this entry point function, I can process the information provided in the request and generate a response that will be converted into an HTTP message and sent to the client via socket. Now we have a foundation for the server, and if we want it to be a REST API, we can create a function that will convert information into JSON, which then can be pasted as a response body. Alternatively, we can make a server that will respond with an HTML page, like in Model View Controller architecture. For now, I choose to go with the HTML page response, since it opens up more possibilities for future modifications. I wrote several functions for error message responses and a method that will return an HTML page by its name. Later, I moved this function into another one to hide a path to pages, and now it's time to write some HTML. Simple page, just to see if it works or not. And now, the moment of truth. Run server, listening to port. By that point, I had all of my code in a single file because I had planned this project to be as simple as possible, but then it started to grow, so I decided to split it into separate files. After spending one evening learning and playing with CMake, I finally decided to apply newly gained knowledge to my project, and it worked on almost the first try. Not including some code issues, of course.
If I do CMake make, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised.
There were some finishing touches, a couple more pages, a simple navigation bar, and here is the result. I have 3 pages, working routing and foundation that I really want to play with. The source code you can get on my GitHub, the link is in the description below. I really enjoyed the process of creating it, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video too. I have plans for adding new features to this project, so stay tuned, and thank you for watching. See ya.